Welcome to Occupational Queerpy, a podcast run by an occupational therapy student exploring the intersection of occupational therapy and the LGBTQIA+ experience. This podcast offers personal perspectives for informational and educational purposes only. We'll be discussing a wide range of LGBTQIA+ topics, and to authentically reflect the community, we'll be using common and slang terms which some listeners may find explicit. Listener discretion is advised. Recording. We're recording.
We are recording.
Lights, camera, action. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Occupational Queerpy. We have a few special guests today as we discuss education. Who do we have here, special guests? Hello.
Hi, I'm Kay.
And I'm JJ.
We're both occupational therapists.
And we're here to talk about education.
It sounds like y'all done this before.
We might have a podcast.
Maybe
Okay.
it's OT After Dark.
OT After Dark, I've heard of it. So can you tell me what you're doing here? Like, what's our relationship?
Yeah, so we have had the honor of mentoring Trent as he does his wonderful OT podcast. Since we've been doing our podcast, OT After Dark, which really talks about sexuality and intimacy and sexual health in occupational therapy practice. And it's been 5 years? Is that right?
6 years.
6 years.
2019.
Oh, my
2019, yeah.
2019, and it is somehow 2025.
Time flies when you're having fun, right? So we got connected, and it's been really exciting to work with you, Trent, and see your podcast grow and see all the great work that you're doing. And it's really great to see another fellow podcaster succeeding out there.
Yeah, it's good to have some OT podcaster friends. So when I was looking for, a mentor, as we do as OT students, like I went through the hoops trying to find y'all, but when I had a fieldwork experience in Chicago, I was working at an engagement center for individuals experiencing homelessness. And one of the OTs, the director there, Andrea, love her, she recommended someone that worked at a university in Chicago, Jen. She's kind of like a sexuality expert. And then she recommended OT After Dark. And from there, that's kind of how I discovered y'all. And yeah, so here we are.
Word of mouth is our friend.
Yes, it is.
Yes, absolutely. So I was just wondering if y'all could share just a little bit about yourselves. Like, what's your relationship to the queer community and just about your journey as occupational therapists?
Let's see where I want to start. Relationship with the queer community. I will say I grew up in a weird little bubble in the United States, which was very diverse and unusually accepting. I was born in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s. And the gay community in particular was always just, I don't know, present in my life.
That's amazing.
I guess. And I'm not going to say it was a obviously there was adults in my life that had things to say, but I don't remember a time in my life where I didn't know someone in the queer community. And then as I grew up, that just kind of became part of my life. Now, depending which alphabet you subscribe to, because some people don't think I belong in the LGBTQ if you stop at the Q. But A-wise, so gray asexual, gray aromantic, a more personal association with the queer community there.
I do accept that. I accept you.
Do you get where I'm coming from though? Because a lot of people are like,
It's crazy. It's crazy how nitpicky like some people can be. It's like, yeah, I am in the queer community, but y'all aren't.
Yeah.
Like, no, this group isn't.
And it's not a big deal to me. Like, it's okay. It is kind of I'm aware that some people are like, no, you don't count. It's just fine.
Yeah, and so I like to say that I put the B in LGBTQ.
Yeah, you do.
In more ways than one, I feel like sometimes. But I do identify as a bisexual cisgender woman. Pronouns she, her. Throw that out there as
she,
well.
her.
So, it's been my life. It's, my lived experience. I don't really remember a time when I didn't feel that way. So I've been trying to, kind of within my own self identity, and how can I bring this into the work that we do, into education, into research, to really help get more information and amplify the B voice.
I saw a fan yesterday, like a flip open fan where I was at yesterday, and it said "Buy Furious," and I was trying to find it because I was like, "Oh, I bet JJ would want that," but I couldn't figure out where the person bought it.
Do you think that, okay, sometimes your letter's not included?
I feel like there is this like umbrella of asexuality and aromantic that, I mean, there's some unique things to that. So it is, I understand why there's some separatism, for lack of a better word there, but I don't feel unwelcome.
That's good. Do you think that's ever impacted like your engagement in anything? Just kind of the discourse in the queer community?
Probably not directly. I don't know. I just live my life. I'm at a point in my life where I'm not too worried about what people are thinking about me.
I can't wait. I cannot wait for that point in my life.
It happens.
We're waiting.
Let me tell you, the 40s in particular, that's a real sweet spot for that.
Yes, very much so.
It's a sweet spot.
So would you say your relationship with the queer community, do you think that played any part in choosing OT as a profession?
I think just my relationship, just growing up in that diverse community did, and just looking for an inclusive world. And at its core, occupational therapy is all about inclusion and equity and diversity. Those three magical words. Like we don't have a profession without those things: diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's the core of everything we do. It's why we do it.
Yeah.
So I think it's just kind of natural for me to be drawn to a profession like that.
Same for you, JJ?
Yeah, I mean, I think my journey into OT was just fueled by wanting, I feel like it's like the cliche answer of wanting to help, but really just thinking of what can I do beyond myself. What can I do that's something greater than my own individuality? And so that's kind of what I've brought in terms of my philosophy to OT in general and my practice. I still am a practicing clinician in addition to being in academia. I like having that blend of both.
I will say,
keeps me grounded.
I will say something, like a very specific thing that pulled me to this profession. I went to school to be a park ranger. My undergraduate degree is actually Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Administration.
Oh my goodness.
With a specialty in natural resources, law enforcement. And then while I was at school, I was various things brought me to being a home health aide for a man in his early 40s with a spinal cord injury. He was like 20 some years post, I think like it's been so long. I want to say it was C3, C4 spinal cord injury. He's quadriplegic. Oh, wow. And he was the one that he would be like, because I would just naturally expect him to do certain things for himself. Like I would always just naturally kind of set back and see what he could do and then jump in when needed. And he would, in a very joking way, he'd be like, "You need to be a fucking OT. OT's making you do stuff." But also part of that relationship was accepting his need and desire to masturbate without judgment, which at the time I didn't think anything of it. Like, he would ask me, like, before I would leave for my session, he's like, could you get, like, he would have, like, a Playboy or something. And could you get that magazine out and open it to a certain page and just kind of position me? And I didn't think anything of it. A few times of that request, he would tell me, he's like, you're like, you and one other person are the only people who, like, don't kind of stigmatize me for asking that. Like, he kind of thanked me for that. And we've never talked about that. It just kind of popped in my head right now of how far back my comfortable nature with promoting.
Right. So y'all have a podcast. You're talking about OT After Dark. Mm-hmm. So for the folks that have not checked out your podcast, can you briefly discuss what OT After Dark looks at?
Oh, briefly. Oh, we talk about all
Or
kinds of
not briefly.
topics.
Let's talk about it all night. Come on.
Anything that comes up, any idea we have that comes up related to sex,
Anything,
intimacy, OT.
sexual health.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of people on too that are not OTs, so really looking at the interdisciplinary aspect of it, lived experience.
Yeah, so y'all discuss sexuality or sex as an ADL.
That's our tagline.
Sex is an ADL.
It sounds like, Kay, you were OTing even before.
Yeah,
OTing.
before I knew I was OTing.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I love hearing pre-OT OT origin stories. It's like so OT coded.
I think so many OTs have stories like that where it's like OT is so ingrained in who I am, I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Similarly, my undergraduate degree is not in anything healthcare related. It is in zoology. And everybody's like, how did you go from zoology to OT? And I'm like, well, actually, they're like very much connected because a lot of what I focused on was evolution, ecology, and organismal biology. And it's really looking at how do animals and organisms adapt to their environment? You know, when things are changing, how are they making these adaptations, these modifications to be successful? And it really aligns itself with what we do as OTs. You know, we're looking at how can we help people to do what they need to do in the places that they need to do it. So it really is not unrelated, even though everybody's like, what? I'm like, no, it's more related than you think.
There's actually, a lot of my undergrad is oddly related too.
Zoology and park rangering. Very OT coded. Today, we're here to talk about hot topic, education. We love talking about it. So y'all are both OT professors,
Yes,
correct?
we are.
Yes, we are. And really, like our podcast too is another form of education. That's kind of how we started it, was to just a new and unique way to disseminate information and get information out to people that were just craving it. Like people were just wanting this information. Then there was nowhere really when we started to find a lot of it.
Very passionate about finding ways to disseminate information in accessible ways that aren't behind a paywall. And some things have to be behind a paywall for various reasons, but we try to do everything we can to make information accessible.
That's amazing. And that's kind of the reason I did my podcast too, talking about education. In my OT program, we had a lot of opportunities for like self-driven research. And I feel like a lot of that for me just tended to lean towards sexuality and the queer community. I am a gay man, so I'm very passionate about the community. Gay man growing up in the South, so there is just a lot of pushback as far as being queer goes. So I was just wanting a place that's safe for individuals, because sometimes in the South, even trying to access queer information or like queer education can be dangerous, you know? So I thought a podcast was a good way for OT practitioners to, you know, get this information at their discretion, like whenever they choose, however they choose. So
yeah, it's beautiful. You can listen to it wherever you want, in your car, in your home, you know, nobody, just wherever you feel the most comfortable.
Exactly. So as educators, I know y'all are very sexuality positive, sex positive individuals. So what does that look like in your classroom setting for y'all?
One of the biggest things that we have set out to really provide education on and really just try to empower people is that when we're talking about whether it's sexuality, identity, sexual health, that it doesn't have to be just one day. We don't need to have the special lecture, and that really it should be embedded and threaded throughout every single class in the OT curriculum.
Yeah, I was looking at some research, and there was a study done by San Jose State, and they did just like a survey of OT students and saw who got like what kind of education they got in regards to just queer education. And I think it was like 1 in 5 students like didn't have any queer exposure, period. So there's definitely a lack of education, which is concerning. My program, we did a pretty good job of like talking about cultural humility was like a huge concept we discussed, which is amazing. And it's just remaining humble in whatever client you engage with. Like they know they know themselves and their culture more. So just like being there and active listening, self-reflection once you obtain the information. But I feel like as far as queer specifics go, I don't think there was a lot of education, which the cultural humility can be used in order to interact with clients that you don't know their culture. But I feel like the best way to obtain knowledge about a certain group or culture or person is to just dive in and get exposed to whatever culture, community, etc. you're wanting to learn more about.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult in education because we talk about a lot about cultural responsiveness or responding to kind of the intersectionality of people and understanding everything that comes with different people. I think it's so hard as educators to cover everything because humans are so diverse. So it's really hard to pick out like we're going to cover this culture, but like then we forget this culture and we forget this culture. So as educators,
Right.
I think I know JJ and I both try to cover as much as we can, but I think that we're always going to be leaving out identities just because I mean no two people are the same.
Right.
So it's more about teaching cultural responsiveness and teaching students like that you need to like you need to be responsive, you need to have that cultural humility, and you need to meet each person where they are and understand that even what you may have learned in school about a certain population may not apply to that client, that you need to have that open mind to every client.
And an, and another thing that we've had the opportunity to do is we've had the opportunity to contribute to several different textbooks, both in OTA education, occupational therapy assistance, and in OT education. And when we're writing these different chapters and providing this information, we really, really made a conscious effort and have really pushed to challenge that heteronormative view that we see a lot in a lot of textbooks, and really being able to include more information regarding the queer community, the LGBTQ community. I mean, we had
Well,
one
even the
textbook.
case study, the first one we did, the case, every chapter needed a case study, and the case study we wrote was all gender neutral terms, so you didn't know. And even that, they were very supportive of that, but there was still conversation of, will this confuse people? Like we did end up putting like, we had to put a little intro saying like, we intentionally used gender neutral names, everything through this. You decide who these people are.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's up to you, the student.
Yeah, and we were able to. This was in a physical disabilities book for OTA practitioners, able to include things like packers, binders,
Yeah.
stand to pee. So a lot of this different adaptive equipment that has not traditionally been
And
included in a
yeah.
lot of OT
And the
textbooks.
editors of that book were so receptive to that. They were thrilled that we were including all of that.
What book is this?
It is, hold on, I don't want to say it wrong.
Yeah, plug those chapters.
Adult Physical Conditions: Intervention Strategies for Occupational Therapy Assistants is an F.A. Davis book. It's pretty common in OTA programs, but they let us write an entire chapter on addressing sexual activity.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we were able to put all the stuff about binders, and yeah, it was fun research too.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then along those lines too, not only in the work and the writings and things that we're doing, because not everybody has those opportunities, right? Not everybody is able to contribute to textbooks, be able to do that. But I at least have kind of made this conscious effort in my test exam questions, in my case study examples that I'm using in class, to not use that heteronormative lens, to talk about, that this person, this is Joe and his husband Steve, or, that we've got these kind of different ways that, and different types of families and different people and relationships that, again, are challenging that heteronormative lens that we see so often.
Y'all were talking about case studies. That reminded me, like, our professors did incorporate queer people. I remember it was like we got random cases, but I was assigned a gay man. Yeah, it's like little things like that definitely make a difference. And I didn't really think about, like, there's 5 million different identities, not just in the queer community.
And I think the podcast taught us a lot about that, because we came from a very United States centric view when we started it. And immediately we're like, people were talking to us and we're like, oh, like things are very different outside of the United States, even about occupational therapy, which is the beautiful thing about the world. Like, there's just so many different identities of people.
And uniqueness.
I do want to talk, you talked a little bit about kind of our privilege of doing textbooks, and a lot comes with that. But it started with this podcast, and the podcast was literally us and a phone.
Like this in my office, just talking into my phone.
And I say that only because there's so much power in individual voices. People didn't know who we were. We were just two people in this room that we're sitting in right now, leaning over a phone, thinking maybe a few we tell the story all the time, but thinking maybe a few friends and family would listen. And then, much to our surprise, the first person that reached out to us within a week of that first episode was from Australia. And we were like, oh, this has more of a, and that grew into a lot of things. So, having a voice, I mean, you just need to put your voice out there. And if you hit a topic, like we hit a topic that people wanted to hear, then people start listening.
I remember listening to one of y'all's episodes, and I think y'all were just like hanging out at a bar. I think it was maybe AOTA conference,
yep.
national conference. And there were just people from all over the world.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy. Yeah, OT After Dark. It's like internationally listened to. Like people, occupational therapy practitioners all over the world
wild.
Listen. And that's really cool to hear that it just started with like a phone and a dream.
It's phone and a dream.
You know?
Not even a fully developed dream. Just like, what the hell? Let's do this.
Let's try it out.
That'll be fun. Yeah.
But I think actually, I mean, that, and we've talked about this in various spaces before, I think that was our superpower and we didn't know it. Is because we didn't think people were going to listen. So we didn't go into it with this, we have to be quote unquote professional. Like we had conversations about not wanting to be like, about we're going to swear and we're going to use slang terms. So we went into it without a lot of pressure because we didn't think people would listen. And then that ended up being our secret superpower.
The secret sauce.
Yeah, it was the secret sauce. Just us being
us.
Being us.
Just yapping, just gabbing.
Which is kind of
and I think that's
sometimes.
what made y'all's podcast. I tailored a lot of my podcasts after y'all's. Let's just talk about our podcast for a second. So, like, I don't know if y'all have had the chance to listen yet, but, like, y'all's little intro, like, disclaimer thing, mine sounds hauntingly similar.
I just
almost
texted
exactly
Kay.
the same.
She texted me today about that, actually. Not in a bad way.
No, I was like, oh, hey, it sounds
But
familiar.
even that disclaimer, there was a lot of conversation that went into that disclaimer. And even me going up to a guy I knew who was an attorney, and I saw him at a bar, and I was like, can I just talk to you really quick about, like, do you think we should have a disclaimer? Should we not? And kind of explaining. And he was like, yeah, you're probably, safe just to make sure. But so much conversation went into, do we need a disclaimer? What should the disclaimer say? I haven't listened to our disclaimer in so long, though. In its entirety. Once we had it set, I didn't think about it.
There we go. We're good. I think there's been a couple iterations.
One or two,
of it.
yeah.
Thank you for the inspo. But I think that's kind of what I wanted to do with this podcast is just create a conversation. Like, I feel like going and looking at the research, yes, that can be done, but sometimes it may not be accessible. Like, not a lot of people have access to, like AOTA, AJOD, or just different databases.
And even understanding how to break that information down is
exactly.
Reading a journal article is not for everyone.
I need a translator. What?
Sometimes you need to be a statistician in order to be able to decipher.
Right. Oh my goodness.
The p-values, the alphas.
Yeah.
Podcast, and then just like the format of like casual chit chat, I think makes it super accessible and fun,
Because then hopefully the people listening just feel like they're part of they're just kind of sitting off to the side listening to a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I know our theme here is education, and I know, kind of we had set out to be able to disseminate information and provide education, but I feel like the amount of education that I have received as a result of this
Oh my
podcast has
goodness.
been astronomical. It's just been huge being able to talk to people, get their lived experience, and I learned so much just from talking to people. And I just think about even my own growth over the past 6 years and kind of where I was when we started and kind of now where we are. And I think that just really gets to the power of talking to people and hearing stories and listening to stories and having that
Which goes back
um,
to cultural responsiveness.
right.
Period.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's all about being, and that's what OT is all about, being able to have conversations, and take from those conversations the meaningful parts of people's lives.
Because at the end of the day, you can hear one thing from a gay man like myself, but like
Yeah.
that's not going to be the story of all the gay people.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something I've like reiterated like throughout the entire podcast. It's like, yes, we have a non-binary person on today, but they are not
Yeah.
speaking to the entirety of the community.
Yeah. Talking about
So
their lived experience.
yeah, at the end of the day, we're client centered. So you can learn all this stuff, but once you meet a new client, you kind of got to like throw it out and
Yeah.
like, okay, this is a new person. This is a unique individual with unique identities, and I need to get to know them. I can
Exactly.
use that knowledge, but I need to focus on the knowledge that they're giving me.
Exactly.
In class, y'all talked a little bit about what y'all do as educators. Do you have any tips for queer education for other educators out there, OT educators?
I mean, the little things that any educator I think should do in general is watch your pronoun use, even like not saying hello ladies and gentlemen today. Like I usually say hey friends, hey folks,
Yeah.
how y'all doing? I say y'all a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um Little things like that. Even changing terminology to like uterus owners and penis owners and just little language changes I think are really important for educators.
And I think too, we saw that shift with APA 7, that there was now the use of singular they. So it's not he/she as it had been in APA 6. So now it's if you do not know the gender identity of that person, or you are going to use singular they. And so it's in those documents, and in most programs are probably following APA style in terms of citations. So it's making sure to include that information, making sure that students know that, hey, we're doing APA and this is part of those that criteria that we're going to be using. And even just like going through your PowerPoints, I think I've done that too, where you kind of see some things like, okay, well, let me switch kind of what some of this language might be. And, we're constantly updating as we do it.
making sure if you're talking about certain, like if you're talking about stroke or anything like some specific condition, making sure you're talking about health disparities and you're covering like the health disparities within the LGBTQIA plus community, health like in these different communities, making sure you're covering those health disparities. Trying to think what else.
We talked about adding case
Adding
studies
case
and
studies.
considering what you're putting in terms of your test questions and how you're asking that.
And even like we've talked about with ADLs, the reason we put things like binders and stand-to-P devices like in the textbook is because that's part of ADLs. So making sure that when you're talking about any area of occupation, you're not doing it from a heteronormative standpoint, which is tricky for an educator if you only know that standpoint.
Yes.
So you
Right.
have to do some research, which again comes from talking to people.
I know, JJ, you have research regarding sexuality and incorporating that into OT curriculum. Do you want to shamelessly plug for a
Plug away,
second?
plug away.
Yes, I have it pulled up here. I was waiting for the perfect moment to plug
Oh!
it. And speaking of making research and information accessible, this is an open access article, which means it's not behind a paywall. It is
Period.
from the Open Journal of Occupational Therapy. It is myself and the wonderful badass Beth Ann Walker. Oh, if you do not know who Beth Ann Walker is, she's from the University of Indianapolis. She's the one who developed the Occupational Performance Inventory of Sexuality and Intimacy, the first assessment tool in OT to address sexuality and intimacy. And she also developed the Occupational Therapy Sexual Assessment Framework. So huge, huge thing in OT. But the two of us published this article in the Open Journal of Occupational Therapy that came out in October 2024, and it is called Mapping the Way Forward, Prioritizing Education for Global Occupational Therapy Practice and Addressing Sexuality and Intimacy, a Delphi Approach. And the beautiful thing at the end of it is there is a lovely document of all these different priorities of what we should be including in OT education. So it's a wonderful resource for other educators out there about what they want to talk about.
Amazing. That was a great plug.
I'm all about a shameless plug.
So what did that look like creating it? How did this group come together?
Ooh, that's like a whole podcast episode in itself about how
I
we
walked
did this.
into Beth Ann Walker's poster session, said hi, OT After Dark, because I knew another OT that knew Beth Ann from something, and she's like, oh, you need to connect. So we met and then passed the information on because we were going to have Beth Ann on the podcast.
Yeah, so she was on my dissertation committee, and I did my research residency with her. And actually, this Delphi study came out of my research residency. So it was actually like 3 years of work that we had worked on together, being able to recruit all of these experts in occupational therapy practice from around the globe. And I think we had people from 19 different countries that participated in this study. And we really wanted to see what was the priorities in terms of understanding the occupational nature of things related to sexuality and intimacy. What do we need to do in order to support practice more? And then also education. So this education pillar of what do students, not only current students, but in terms of current practitioners who might be doing continuing education, what do they need to know as well to expand their knowledge in sexuality and intimacy?
Students never want to hear about networking, but networking's important.
Takes you places.
Takes you places. I mean, the bulk of all of our episodes basically are just us, like people we've met at conference and had conversations, or people that we just reached out to in various capacities, whether we are slipping into somebody's DMs.
Happens all the time.
Or more professional emails. Like networking, get you places.
And now we're traveling the globe.
I saw.
Our talk.
You want to talk about that? I saw y'all are going to Australia soon.
Wild.
Yes,
That's so cool. With Beth Ann Walker.
Yeah.
Yes. And Beth Ann and I are going to be presenting our research at the World Association for Sexual Health Conference, which is in Brisbane, Australia.
Have y'all ever been to Australia?
No.
That's so exciting.
It's a little intimidating.
A little, just again, us here talking on our phone on our podcast, and 6 years later,
we're going to Australia. I think it's so cool how tight knit. Like, it's wild how tight knit the OT community is. Like, everyone knows everyone, and that's, like I was saying earlier, that's kind of how I got introduced to y'all, was from a friend of a friend recommending you. And then how did I even reach out? I think she gave me your email.
Yeah, I remember getting an email from you and be like, hey, you want to talk to me? I was like, sure, let's set up a time. Let's chat. Here's a Zoom link.
and then we were Zooming, yeah. And then they said, sure, we'd love to. And then just like that, it's amazing. Now, thank y'all for being my mentors again, by the way. It's been a whirlwind.
You're so close to being done.
So close. It's been amazing. And hopefully one day I too will go to Australia.
We'll bring you one day.
So do y'all have anything y'all want to talk about? Is there anything we've missed?
I think the only other thing, I'm gonna divert the conversation a little bit and going back to, and I know I had mentioned at the beginning that I like to put the B in LGBTQ, but that has also been a passion of mine is to in my research. So I've been looking at sexual activity in bisexual adults to really, because I don't know if you've ever looked for any sort of research or anything about bisexual people, but there is very, very
Hard to
little.
find.
Well, it's because the world doesn't think you exist.
That is true, despite the fact that almost 50% of people in the LGBTQ community identify as bisexual. But that comes with its whole host of other issues of mental health.
And if listeners don't understand, just look up bi erasure. You know
Yes,
why
bi erasure
that
and biphobia.
biphobia.
It's out there. And, it's because there is a lot of that, whether it's that internalized biphobia or they're getting it from external sources, that a lot of people may not want to come out. They may not want to talk about their identity. So they're internalizing a lot of things, which then can lead to things like depression, anxiety. So there's a lot of these healthcare disparities that the bisexual community experiences. And so looking at that, I've wanted to, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start in my own community. Okay, let's get information out there. Let's understand what our experience is, and then let other healthcare practitioners understand to get that support in practice. So people can understand, okay, these are the different things that someone who identifies as bisexual may come to you and want to talk to you about, things that are related to sex and intimacy, but really just kind of understanding the broad scope of what's been interesting about this research too is not only looking at sexual activity, but the different relationship dynamics that have come out of it. So, we're looking at people that are cisgender, transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary, kind of all these different gender modalities and gender identities, and how these different relationships look. So it might be a bisexual woman with a cisgender man. It might be a cisgender man with a bisexual man. And so there's all kind of these different nuances of what the relationship looks like that I think a lot of times doesn't really get talked about or isn't really considered. So when we're talking even in examples in classes, our default is to say, or like we were talking to people. I don't know if you've experienced this, Trent, at all, but it was like, oh, do you have a girlfriend if you're talking to someone who identifies as a man, or someone like, oh, okay, do you have a husband? Do you have a boyfriend? And it's that default of that heteronormative. So to be able to kind of switch that language and talk about partners, do you have a partner, and not make a lot of these assumptions, because I've just observed that so much.
Yeah, we kind of talked about like microaggressions like that, because that is considered a microaggression. This just made me think about that. But when I was in undergrad, I started in the closet in undergrad, but I remember having lunch, like just a group of people like from our dorm hallway or whatever went to the cafeteria together. And we were, all scattered about having our get to know you chit chats or whatever. And this girl, she's like, asking about me, like where I'm from, whatever. She's like, do you have a girlfriend? I'm like, no. And she's like, do you have a boyfriend? I'm like, no. And she's like, but you're gay, right? I'm like, yes. And then she just carried on. And that was like actually so pivotal to me. Like that was such like a monumental moment, because like it was so normalized, and being gay was never normalized, like growing up in the South, like that was never a thing. So just that conversation, her asking like, boyfriend, girlfriend, huh? I thought it was like huge for me. And like she definitely doesn't even realize like how like how
that was.
Right, like so cool. So yeah, just like little things like switching up the pronoun use, that can make such a big difference.
And just not making the assumption. Mm-hmm.
Do we have any final thoughts? Is there anything you want to leave the people with?
I just want to go back to everybody use your voice. If you have something you're passionate about, use your voice. It doesn't have to be a podcast, but use your voice and advocate for the communities that are important to you.
Yeah, and keep learning. Everybody keep learning. There is always something new to learn. It's the reason that they call occupational therapy a practice. You are not going to be an expert ever. We are going to continue to practice and continue to learn and continue to grow.
Beautiful. Well, thank y'all for coming on. It's been so fun. It's been an honor.
This has been great.
Fun.
Maybe one day I will be internationally acclaimed OT podcast. And we will be traveling to Australia together.
Or some other amazing country.
Yeah, who knows where we could go. Oh, it's been fun being on the other side of the podcast for once. I like this.
And we don't have to edit this.
I could get used to this.
Right. Thank y'all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.